Good morning, everyone, and it's a real honor to be here. Okay, I've got my slides on the screen. If I can just move into slideshow. And thank you, John, for a very interesting perspective and opener. I'd like to be in an environment that hasn't seen inflation in 29 years. It's actually very exciting to be in a place like that. I guess the term VUCA would be very new to many Australians from what I hear from you. Can you move on to my next slide, please? Which is really just what this is about. I remember my first encounter with VUCA. It was long before I moved to Nigeria. You know, countries in Africa, many countries in Africa were termed VUCA countries. Because everything was so unpredictable that it was difficult to have a long-term strategy for the businesses that were trying to operate there. I'm not here to take everyone through the definition of VUCA. I think everybody probably on this call totally understands that already. I'm also not going to spend a bit of time on too much introduction of myself. I currently work for ADVAN CMCO, but I've had experiences that last the last 20-something plus odd years. I don't want you guys to guess my age, even though my gray hairs on my face may give me away. But I've been operating in Africa for quite a while, and currently plying my trade with ADVAN CMCO. So if we move on to the next slide, I think we all recognize this thing on the screen, right? I think we all do. This is what I call the epitome of VUCA. This is what has put everyone on the same level, that we can have John all the way in Sydney, Australia, talking to us about a topic which probably a couple of years ago may have been a bit difficult to have a conversation across the globe. But this is the epitome of VUCA. This is where the coronavirus has made all of us, has actually made the whole world into a place where it's volatile, it's complex, it's uncertain, and it's definitely not predictable. If you move on to my next slide, next slide. I think when it hit, I think you all would recall that in Nigeria we had a lockdown, and then in recent times we've had an ease of lockdown. Just take a look at the headlines you're seeing. Okay, I think we moved a little bit too fast. Yeah, and look at the headlines you're seeing. I mean, this is a bit of unpredictability. Even during lockdown and even at ease of lockdown, we're still unsure whether we want to reopen school or reopen worship centers. Everything is being rendered into a state of, you know, uncertainty. And I think it's not just us, but everywhere in the world. The next slide is really my favorite slide that I've used a couple of times to describe how we find ourselves in these current times. Next slide, please. Now, how many of you recognize the gentleman in the picture? I think we all do. The man in the glasses is called Dr. Fauci. He's the big guy who looks after diseases in the world. He's the main go-to person. He's the guru. Now, the guy next to him is supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. He's the president of the United States. And the statement this Dr. Fauci makes, which I quite like, and it actually epitomizes what VUCA is all about, is you don't make the timeline. The virus makes the timeline, which means we all have to sit and wait and see what happens to this virus. Am I right? That for me is what VUCA is all about. And if the mighty USA is also having these issues and is in a state of VUCA, then what about the rest of us in the so-called developing world in places like in Africa and in places like Nigeria? We are probably in a much more difficult position. So the whole thing about marketing in VUCA starts from the external environment, what is going on, and then we start narrowing down to, okay, so what does it mean for us? Next slide, please. So this is a slide which some of you on this platform, my colleague marketing directors, would know that these are the conversations happening in the boardroom or in the meeting rooms of most of our businesses at the moment. I see some faces nodding their heads. Okay, aside from the pandemic, you know, we've seen what is happening to our oil price. We've seen that you know, our exchange rate is changing. Actually, the real issue at the moment is that you can't even get enough forex to conduct your business, which you would ask, what has a marketeer got to do with these issues? But I will come to that. And then we also see an upward trend in inflation. So we've seen things moving up, price of goods moving up above stuff. I see Bumi nodding her head, you know, and we've got to stay close to it. This is really what our bosses want to talk about. And I think it's important that we contextualize it properly. I had to add port condition because, you know, you can do all the creative stuff you want, but if you can't get your raw materials out of the port into your factory or wherever you're doing, you're actually not going to do any marketing at all. Okay, so this is really the reality, and most of our businesses are in this environment at the moment. But John, next slide. John did raise a very important word, which I quite liked, because that is the basis of my conversation with everyone today. Next slide, please. Which is, marketing needs to be a lighthouse to guide business. It may sound cliche, but it is the truth. And if you take the analogy of a lighthouse stands at the beach, and in whether you've got troubled waters or calm waters, a lighthouse shines this light for ships to find their way to the port. And that is what we must do as marketeers. We've got to be able to create that light that our consumers and our customers and the people who rely on us to find that light and navigate their way to us. We are in a competitive environment, so the brighter your light shine, the brighter you're going to get your consumers and customers to port. And John did mention, and I will keep quoting him because I like the fact that someone so far away and in a different kind of world seems to be having very similar points of view to what I'm about to say, is that there is opportunity, and there are opportunities. And most companies are benefiting from these opportunities because they are able to navigate through these stormy waters. Next slide. So, I think the first thing, I mean, in any organization where you've got marketing has to be the champion of the consumer. And if you're in service, it's the customer. But, you know, so for the rest of my car, I'm going to use consumer because according to Professor Doyin Salami, is whoever pays for your good or service is your consumer. So I'm going to use consumer for most part of the conversation I do. If you look at Nigeria, we have a lot of consumers, 200 million plus consumers. We've got to be able to cater for them, whether or not the world is falling apart or not. That's our job as marketeers. That's our job as marketeers in guiding our businesses to make sure that they arrive safely at the ports of our business. Okay, whether or not you're catering for the top part of the pyramid, you know, or the bottom part of the pyramid. It really doesn't matter. You've got to be able to make sure that you have enough insights and enough knowledge and enough wherewithal to be able to guide businesses to make the decisions to take care of each and every one in the consumer space that you're targeting. And that is the primary mandate. Whether or not there's COVID or no COVID, our job doesn't end because people must eat, people must bath, people must use cards to make purchases. You know, life doesn't come to a standstill simply because we are in a VUCA environment. And I think that is the role of marketeers. Next slide. So I determine that if you look at what's going on in our environment, the VUCA environment as we would term it, consumers are in a difficult space, marketeers are in a difficult space, and businesses are in a difficult space. I think the first thing, apart from our mandate of making sure we have the insights to draw on our mixes and what we do and tell the consumer, is to try and do what I term these 6 things, okay? So first, you've got to empathize with the consumer. Is that, look, I hear you. things are tough, you know, if possible, go ahead, do some palliatives, do whatever you need to do to make sure you're empathizing, the way you speak to the consumer, the way you communicate. You must be able to do a little bit of empathizing, because consumers can also be skeptical about the role of brands in their lives when they don't empathize that, hey, what's happening to you? Don't you see what I'm going through? We've got to educate about what is happening right now with COVID, or what is happening right now with this. So we've got to be able to play a role bigger than just we want to sell you our product or want to sell you our service. We've got to be able to encourage them through the phases they're going through. We've got to be able to entertain them, because at the end of the day, brands have a role in making sure that they add value to people's lives. The number one currency of all humanity is happiness. So how do we make people happier than they were before? And brands have to find their way, businesses have to find their way through that. And we must cater for everyone. And more importantly, we must evolve. And I think John mentioned the whole idea of offline to online. There is so much evolution going on. Recently, I had to buy a product, a hand sanitizer, and I looked at the label, and I saw that it came from one of our beverage producing companies, and I go, wow, you've got to evolve in these times. When things are changing, you've got to move with the times. And I think those are the things that we as marketeers have a role to our consumers in making sure that we stay close to them. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there's some practical things to focus on. This is a chart I found in the WPP, whatever, about in the WPP document about what you do regards communication, how you remain responsible in the short term, you think long term, how you engage different audiences, but more importantly, how you activate your purpose. Because we all operate for businesses that have a purpose. So you've got to be able to make sure you navigate it in the way that you live your purpose, but your way of achieving that purpose is you remain agile. You have to evolve to actually continue to achieve that purpose. So I'm not going to go into it, but I think if you think about communication alone, you have to listen, be transparent. There's a couple of things I mentioned on it, but I'll share this slide later. If anybody's interested, you can look at some of these principles, which I found very useful. But my next slide is probably the crux of what I'm going to talk about today. Next slide. I say be commercially agile and operationally shrewd. Now, I sit in a position where we have to make decisions on what we do with our product line and our ranges, and what we do with the front line of our business on a daily basis. And I've got 10 principles I just want to run through very quickly. I hope I don't overdo my time. The first is ensure the science of marketing practice leads. All of us on this call are marketeers, and we know that there are certain things that we must make sure are right. So first of all, when it comes to communication, make sure your creativity is on the spot. Make sure that your mix in terms of what you're doing with your product or your services, with pricing, the things that you know, if you move, the mundane stuff, you know, if you move, will have the impact that you so desire. It is not the fluffy stuff, which sometimes we can get drawn into. And I guess in most businesses, you find marketeers get termed with various names, they like the fluffy stuff. In VUCA times, make sure the science leads. Ensure the business understands that this is the part of the business that is holding our access to our most important stakeholder consumers in place. Your strategy is in your product or your service. It is not in any digital strategy or whatever. What you're selling is your strategy. You can have some other supportive strategy, but if it's not talking to what you're selling or what you're trying to sell, then forget it. And I think that's very important. Wield your pricing sword with circumspection, okay? You saw all the things happening in the market that I talked about, oil price, whatever. There is pressure on our bottom lines. There is pressure on our profits. There is pressure on businesses delivering their mantle to their shareholders. So pricing is a tool that must be wielded, but you've got to use it with circumspection. Don't leave opportunities on the table, but at the same time, don't get greedy. And so marketeers need to understand how to wield that sword very well, else you cut yourself and it will be a deep wound for a long time. I can't believe I'm saying this in a marketing forum, but AMP is great to have, but not a God-given right. Okay? It will be cut when things get tough. Let's get used to it. But when things get tough, let's understand what we do before that. If you don't have AMP, it doesn't mean that your business comes to an end. And you've got to make sure that you're investing in your product so that when the AMP is cut, you have enough to hold you through the tough times. Everyone is a frontline person, okay? Don't stay in the comfort in the office and try and, new slides and you've got to understand what is happening on the ground, okay? I think my time is running out. And then you've got to remain operationally shrewd. Use partners, create transparency, use data, etc. Make sure that you are actually on top of your information. You're fishing where the fish. Next slide. So long term, be guided by your purpose. Always think long term. Rekindle the basics of our vocation. Eliminate waste, and make sure that when you eliminate waste, the benefit of the waste is used to spiral more growth, because that's the only way we're going to win in the long term. Next slide. So I go back to the principle of the lighthouse, just to recap and to close. I like this quote. It says, "I can think of no other edifice constructed by man as altruistic as the lighthouse they were built to serve." So if marketeers are lighthouses, we were built to serve. We were built to serve our consumers, and we're built to serve our businesses. So we have to do that. Next slide. And so I have a mandate and the challenge for ADVAN. Okay, ADVAN was built to serve. ADVAN is supposed to be a lighthouse for marketing all across all of Nigeria. So I like the 4 tenets of ADVAN: visionary, thought leadership. So we must be able to have fora like these where we can have that very high level thought leadership. And I'm grateful to the likes of Bumi and Idiri and the team that have put this together to share this knowledge and to build capacity for all of us to guide us through how we operate in our businesses. I am glad people like are on this forum where we can use data, research, and the right level of insights collected to be able to guide our businesses. And that is very, very, very key in going forward. Next slide. So there will be winners and there will be losers. In VUCA environments, if you don't act fast, remain agile, and be flexible, you will lose. It's as simple as that. And we've seen some of the big organizations globally lose. But for us as marketeers, our job is make sure that our businesses don't lose. So we have to find the opportunity within the difficult moments that we find ourselves. And I think that is the basis of why we are here today. How do we navigate marketing during these VUCA times? And by that, I go to my last slide. Just a summary, just so everybody walks away with a few things. Okay, the whole world is in VUCA, not just Nigeria. We have to navigate our issues. Whether it's port congestion, we must fix them. We must face our realities. We must champion our consumers. We must make sure that we are guided by our business purpose. Commercially agile, I talked about a few things to make us commercially agile, innovate, all of those things. And then there's a role ADVAN plays in our lives, and ADVAN must play that role a lot harder. And to be honest, opportunities do abound. This is Nigeria. We've always survived. We've always been there. We will survive this one too. And with that, I say thank you. And my final slide is have a cup of